Of people much older than us, and I'll never forget what they said. One of the counselors there said to us, listen, the kids over there, the younger ones, the adults over there, they're crazy. You guys, you're not crazy. You just have problems. And I'll never forget, one of the kids that was in there with me goes, yeah, but that's exactly what they're telling the people in the other two units. So pretty quickly I realized that this place is problematic, and I was scared. But he looked like Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and he had a cutting. And scary looking guy. I realized that he was just a kid with a lot of problems, different than mine, a lot of problems. So you're in there with kids with severe drug issues, with some were suicidal, some weren't, some had aggression issues. It was a co-ed unit during the day. Obviously, you're in your house, you know, boys and girls with girls. And after about 2-3 days, I realized, okay, the only way out of here is to leave. So I did the work. I sat down and I started, for the first time, really talking about what was going on for me and listening. You can learn a lot in those places by listening to what's going on for other people. And I realized that a lot of what was going on internally for me had to do with the fact that, you know, I mean, what do we need? We basically need safety and acceptance. You know, from parents, we also need guardrails. And at that time, I was lacking all three. And I think, you know, like pure intensity, I'm a pretty, I'm not an emotional person in the sense that I don't emote easily, but I'm a very feeling person. I feel a lot. I don't know how other people perceive me, but I feel a lot. And I think think what was happening in my family unit at that time felt devastating. And I missed my sister. She was off in college. She had gone off to college. I've always been close to my sister. And because this was late 80s, early 90s, I also didn't know many people from homes without, mom and dad, this kind of thing. And I had been exposed to a lot already. One of the beautiful things about skateboarding, at least back then, it's different now, is that it was completely self-organized. So whenever I could, I would get a ride with a friend or take the bus up to San Francisco. There was this now famous / infamous scene, the Embarcadero Plaza, that's called EMB, was this self-organized place. You have these in major cities elsewhere. There was Love Park in Philadelphia, you have Washington Square Park in New York. And back then, I learned a lot from the older, it was mostly guys. That now there's more women in skateboarding, girls and women in skateboarding, and they rip, they're so good. But back then it was mostly guys, and so I learned all sorts of things there, some of which, I was far too young. I got basically a street education from kids that weren't going to school and who were just like living this wild, free life. And I do want to be clear that even though let's call them untoward, there was also an incredible beauty in, my friend Jake Rosen started, he had his own challenges that we'll talk about later, and he brought a video camera, high-8 video. He started filming the now, truly iconic videos of Mike Carroll. These names will mean things. Henry Sanchez, Mark Gonzalez, so he just started filming all this, and then he made the first Plan B videos, and he made the Waiting for Lightning documentary about Danny Way, jumping the Great Wall of China. And our friend Mike Layback, who was the photographer of the podcast of things, and became one of the most iconic action sports portrait photographers, was a kid who basically came out of Michigan, graduated high school, something he probably did, and then he slept in the clothing stacks and the gaps, hung out at Embarcadero and took photos, and those photos and those videos that Mike and Jacob and other people took are now iconic in skateboarding. And so I was also exposed to this incredible world of DIY, take your passion, take your circumstance, and pick a craft and just document stuff. And so in many ways, what happened in Embarcadero, what happened in skateboarding, and I always loved punk rock music and going to shows. I was talented. I didn't suck at skateboarding, but I wasn't going to go anywhere with it. But what I saw was, if you love something, you want to learn as much as possible about it, and you love the culture around it, you do have to learn how to sort out the untoward elements. Don't get yourself into trouble. But take that energy, and I just took it to academics. I remember realizing when I got to graduate school, I found a wonderful woman named Barbara Chapman. Unfortunately, she passed away. And at the time, she said, listen, I'm going to have a couple kids, but we have grants, So she said, I'm going to have a couple kids, so I'm going to be very busy. We have grants, and here's the lab. She said, don't burn the lab down, don't burn yourself, but just do experiments, have fun. And I realized, this is the mix. And I had so much energy, and I thought, I never have to go home. So I lived there a lot of the time, brush my teeth in the sink there, work out at the gym, shower, come back. And I remember people saying, you're going to burn out. What are you doing? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I would work 80, sometimes 100 hours a week. I was so happy. And I realized, this is the exact same feeling. I'm just taking my interest and I'm just pouring myself into it. I did that when I was a graduate student. I did when I was a postdoc. And actually, when I was a postdoc, I started writing some music articles for Thrasher magazine. I've always kept some little tie to the skateboarding industry that way, just to make some extra cash. And then when I was a junior professor, I had to really pour myself just into the laboratory. But it still worked out. And I guess the point is that earlier you and I were talking about, if you have, and I'm borrowing this phrase from one of my heroes, Martha Beck, who's a wonderful person and teacher of such wisdom, and she calls it a interest-based attention system. Some people might call it ADHD, but have you ever noticed that even people, and we know this from scientific literature, kids, adults with ADHD, when they're so-called ADHD, when they are doing something they really love, they're like a laser. They're not going to peel off that. Their attention is like level 11 out of 10. So I took that energy that I've always had in me for fish, for tropical birds, skateboarding, punk rock music, eventually it was biology, and I just went, okay, here are my chips. I'm all in. But the goal has always been and remains to what I learn and share it. Because the real joy in doing anything, for me anyway, is the ability to share in that knowledge or in that experience. And so those early years were really choppy and really dangerous, frankly. But then when I started a laboratory and decided, yeah, I'm going to study human stress, let's go get VR of stressful circumstances. And my friend Michael Muller, who's a very accomplished portrait photographer in Hollywood and also takes photos of great white sharks out of cages, he said to me, oh, your VR stimulus in your lab, here's what he told me. He's like, it sucks. He said, it sucks. It doesn't look real. It's all CGI. It's not scary at all. How about we, go film some great white sharks down in Guadalupe Island and leave the cage? And, the young Andrew was like, okay. So got dive certified, went and did it 1 year, stayed in the cage, went the next year, exited the cage. I'm not recommending people live this way. I'm not, because I had an air failure at depth the second year while I was in the cage. I bailed out, I made it, I lived, but it was super scary. And it was not an experience I want to repeat. And I realized, so got dive certified, went and did it 1 year, stayed in the cage, went the next year, exited the cage. I'm not recommending people live this way. I'm not, because I had an air failure at depth the second year while I was in the cage. I bailed out, I made it, I lived, but it was super scary. And it was not an experience I want to repeat. And I realized, that's the line. Like the great Oliver Sacks, another hero of mine, a British trained neurologist and author, he wrote, was basically what became the script for Awakenings and things like that. There's a quote about him that resonates a lot. And the quote, I think, is, an early teacher of his said, Oliver will go far, provided he does not go too far. And so, you have to be careful, right? These adventures, leaving school, you can't be haphazard about it. So if you look at the broad arc, it's highly nonlinear. But there's a common thread through all of it, which is this desire to learn, curiosity, desire to share, intensity. And when I'm involved in any one thing, and I recommend that if people are involved in any one thing, podcast, or video games, math, or AI, or program, whatever it is, skateboarding, whatever it is, that you can't be haphazard. Progress, even if you change things over time, is the consequence of taking that inherent openness that we each have, and whatever level of intensity we have, and making sure that you do take steps forward. And what I've learned is, as a child, as an adolescent, and as an adult, there are all these traps along the way. There are all these chutes down to failure and destruction, and you have to be very, very thoughtful. And so you can't be reckless.
I'm really compelled as well by the letter you sent to your parents.
Yeah, they must have been very surprised. That letter was written in a house on a little street in a little town called Isla Vista, Pasado Street, where I'd essentially been squatting like a ferret. That was I tell you that.
What the fuck?
Ce?
Ai capul așa de mare, cât îți stă căștile și pe căștul capului.
Nu te aud, lasă-mă în pace.